Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. I'm Trevor Lane, joined as always by Keith Smith. Make sure you subscribe over on the YouTube channel and give us that 5-star rating and review over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Okay, that was my quick pitch. We're going to get into basketball stuff now. Keith, the NBA, more expansion talk. I'm excited. I think it'll be fun to have expansion hit the NBA. The only thing is, people always ask, well, does that mean it's starting like next season? No. This will take at least a few years. In fact, the latest report says 2027, maybe 2028 by the time we actually get a team on the floor and playing. How do you feel about that and the latest expansion news that we just got today?
Yeah, it's coming. That part is
It just takes
obvious.
time.
I think at this point, yeah, at some point we're getting 2 new teams. That's going to happen. The question is, are we getting only 2 new teams? Are we going to get more? When is it going to happen? Where is it going to happen? Those are the big questions. A lot of this stuff is coming out of ESPN. Ran a pretty full piece of stuff that's a little newsy, a little explainer, a little bit of everything. It was Brian Windhorst, Tim Bontemps, and Kevin Pelton put it all together, all about NBA expansion. Seems like they're doing a little expansion week here, I guess, before camps kick off. So a lot of this is coming out of there.
But
yeah, that's it, right? Yeah. So what they've got is they've got a basically saying league sources, people who are working on forming the bidding groups, are saying the 27-28 season is the most likely, although starting in 2026, 27 isn't impossible. So we know it's not going to be this year, obviously,
or next year.
Or next year. 26, 27, and I've been saying this, I think as long as you and I have been talking about it, that's like the absolute earliest we would see it. And that's if they get things moving here in the next few months, and then by the beginning part of the year, like we're really kicking off the bidding process and all that, then you get kind of the year to set up, and then you bring in the teams into play for 26, 27, which would mean all the offseason stuff would happen after next season. So the expansion draft, the NBA draft, all of whatever they're doing, that would all happen after the 25-26 season. Sure, I could see that, but I do think that 27, 28 seems far more realistic, just because they're not going to rush this process. They're not going to push it any earlier than it needs to be. We're not going to step all over the article because people can go read it. But there's a lot of stuff about, what happens with the expansion fees, what cities are interested in, what is maybe holding some of this up? Why has this not happened yet? Then they get into what cities are the front runners, what other cities could be in there. How do the players feel? Could the players veto this? And the answer that they put in there is a pretty simple, they could put up a fight, but they're not going to, because this is
more
30
jobs.
more. Yeah, exactly. 30 more standard jobs, 6 more two-way jobs if there's 2 teams, and off we go with that. So it's a good article, a lot of stuff in there. The big, I think, newsy piece is that 27-28 start date, which does sound like, man, that's so far, but it's only 3 years away. Like, that's only 3 more seasons, and then we'd have two new teams coming in. So, I'm very, very curious to see, where this goes and what happens, and when do we actually formally start this process beyond just we're kind of looking at it, we're sort of talking about it, stuff that's been out there for the last year or so.
Yeah, and there's, again, the sense is that this is going to happen, and we've talked about this quite a bit. And the 2 front runners, of course, being Seattle and Las Vegas. I think those are the heavy front runners. The article did mention, again, not want to go into everything that was in there, but Mexico City as a possibility, as well as some other places that are alternative options. And maybe those get like a 3rd and 4th team. Maybe we see something like that happen, where you get 2 of these alternative locations, get aside from Seattle and Vegas, get teams down the road. But for right now, I do think it's going to be Seattle. I think it's going to be Las Vegas. We'll see one Western team move east. We've talked a lot about that, but the article did mention that they agreed with me, and I think with you as well. I forget where you fell on this, but I've been of the belief that Minnesota makes the most sense as the team to move. And the article ultimately agreed with that, despite the fact that technically Memphis and New Orleans are the further east teams. But that Minnesota makes the most sense. So that was the other interesting
Yep.
thing that was in there. But it did said that say something, I'm paraphrasing, but something to the fact that it would be really contentious on which team gets to move east. I think that would be, in addition to all of the, the expansion draft and everything else that adds a lot of fun to that off season, the fight between Memphis, New Orleans, and Minnesota in terms of staying west or moving east, I think that would be an incredible undercurrent as well.
Yeah, agreed. Because as it stands today, and as it has been, we're moving into like decade two of
Mm-hmm.
the Western Conference being the stronger conference than the East. The East was the power conference for a lot of the 90s. The East had, some of the best teams were coming out of the Eastern Conference, and it was a little unbalanced that way. And then
Mm-hmm.
we kind of turned into the 2000s, and so I guess we're pushing we're now into decade two, because I would say it's right around 2000
I
about when
believe
that flipped.
since 2000, I looked this up. I think a few months ago. I think since 2000, there was one season where the East had a better overall winning percentage than the West. Since 2000,
Yeah, so
it has been a
yeah.
while.
So obviously get us out of here. I think also, just if you're looking long term, hey, if Wembanyama is going to stay in San Antonio and become like the guy that you have to beat every year, get me out of his conference too, right? And there's
Sure.
no guarantee on how any of this will play out, but yeah, I can totally get that. Minnesota has for years, before even the Grizzlies were in Memphis, has been like the travel is just killer for them. Their closest team, I think they said, is like 680 miles
Mhm.
away, and that's the Nuggets, and like that's just way further than anybody else has to go to play a conference game against a conference team. And like you said, yeah, Memphis and New Orleans, yes, we had the map up a few shows back. They are further east, but they're very close to the Texas teams. They're like right there. You can kind of hop over and you're going to play them. So yeah, I think that'll be interesting to see how that kind of comes together with that part of it. I did think it was neat that they did fully clarify. So I'm glad, because it's what I thought the story was. If Seattle comes back, all
Oh yeah.
expectations are that they would be the Supersonics, and yes, they would take back all of their history. So the title, their retired numbers, all of the franchise records, all that stuff would revert back to Seattle, and Seattle would be the would kind of be the team of note again. So there we would be with that. So I think that is really interesting as well to note that. Yeah, I'm glad you pulled the map back up. Yeah, again, you can see Memphis and New Orleans further east than Minnesota, but they're right there with the Thunder and the Mavs and the Spurs and the Rockets. They're all very close to each other. So they're going to use this as an opportunity to redraw the NBA division map somehow
Mhm.
and figure it out. But yeah, my guess would be Minnesota, because you have that nice kind of little quartet there of northern central teams, I guess, with Milwaukee, Chicago, Indiana, and Detroit. And then you'd have Minnesota right there. Cleveland could stay in that mix. Maybe you do something with Toronto. There's all kinds of ways you could play that out.
And I thought one of the interesting things was there was a bit about, well, you would get roughly 300 million bucks per team. That would be the kind of influx that would be coming in cash wise from the expansion fees and all of that, which would be a nice check to go get if you're an NBA club. I mean, for anybody to get that kind of a check, it would
Yep.
be nice. But mentioning that they also have to weigh, though, what are the long-term ramifications of two new clubs coming in? That's two extra teams that are taking a piece of the revenue pie. The
Yep.
question is, would those two teams add to the revenue enough to where it offsets the fact that you're now splitting that pie up by 32 teams instead of, well, actually, I guess when it comes to the TV deal, Keith, isn't there this where we get into, or maybe this was bought out? Do you remember the story about, I think it was the St. Louis
Yep.
Spirit,
Yep.
about
Yep.
that team? Did they buy that out, or does that still
Yeah,
exist
they
where they
did.
still get a
That's
piece?
done now. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. They finally bought them out of that. So what Trevor's talking about is when the ABA folded and teams were joining the NBA, the St. Louis Spirits, they agreed to, we're not going to fight this, but for not fighting it, we want a chunk of like basically it was like revenue, but specifically it was called out television rights
in
when you
perpetuity.
move forward. So they have been for years upon years getting a large check from the league. I don't think they were a full share member like the other teams because, of course, they're not a team, but they were getting paid every year, every time the NBA signed a new big TV deal for years and years and years. The St. Louis owners, whoever owned the team and it was handed down, got a check from the league for their share of that television revenue. So even though they didn't have a team, and that was part of like, hey, we're not going to throw a huge fight and battle to try to be a franchise in the league or any of that stuff. Just pay us this, and that finally got like I think they like paid him a lump sum and said go away,
Yeah,
like because we're done with this.
I'm
Like
looking at.
we got to do this. So
They paid him 500 million because
yeah,
at that point, and this was in I guess 2014. At that point, they were receiving almost 15 million per year.
yeah,
This is in 2014, despite the team not playing a game in over 40 years.
yeah.
And so the NBA
Heck of
finally
a
bought
deal.
them out.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's it. It's the NBA equivalent of the Bobby Bonilla deal, but maybe to an
yeah.
even greater degree here.
Yep.
But anyway, that was why the thought that came into my head was when we're splitting revenue,
You
is
split,
there
yeah, you split
actually
it 33 ways.
a ghost team
Yeah,
in there
yeah.
that you're also splitting revenue to? But I had forgotten that yeah, they did wind up buying them out. But anyway, that was a tangent away from expansion and everything.
That's what we
One
do
of those
here.
cool stories in sports that they made that
Yeah.
decision and decided to take that gamble rather than take the money right up front, and ended up paying off for them in a big way.
Well, and
But
it
anyway,
is funny because I remember when expansion was being really talked about, like over the pandemic. Because remember, there was this
mhm,
thought of, hey, do you expand as a way for owners to maybe recoup some of the money that
yeah,
they lost during the pandemic? Now, ultimately, that didn't end up being a thing. But one of the cities that was talked about at the time was St. Louis, and I remember them saying like, well, for years and years, nobody really cared because they're already getting money. Like, so why do we want an actual team and have to pay salaries and all this other stuff?
right.
They're probably
We get
paying
a
one
nice check.
accountant and yeah, one accountant and one banker, right? And that's it. Like, and then just thank you for cashing our check yearly and off we go. So, but now that they don't have that, maybe they could jump back in there. And that it's so funny. That is like the number one thing that like frightens Celtics fans is the idea of there being a St. Louis team, because Jason Tatum has been pretty open, like, hey, Boston is home now. But if there was a St. Louis team, like everybody knows, the minute he could force a trade, sign there, he's off, he goes there. So
He'd be
I
out.
don't think it's going to happen. They're not one of the more prominently mentioned cities. It is a pretty open secret at this point that unless somebody comes with absolutely like bonkers money offering for an expansion team, it's going to be Seattle and Las Vegas. Like everybody kind of knows that. It's just who are the right partners, and quite frankly, who's going to pay the most from the various groups, because they mentioned in the piece the various people who could and who may not bid on a team, and a couple people who definitely won't be in the bidding. But there's no
Mhm.
shortage of bidders just from those two cities alone that are going to be interested in bringing a team in. So it's they're going to get the expansion fee they want. Right now, it's like they want 10 billion for the two teams. They want 5 billion a piece for the two teams. There's some thought they're holding until the Celtics sale finalizes, because if the Celtics go for everything the NBA hopes they'll go for, that just increases what they can tell the
Raise
expansion
that
cities.
price.
We need
Yep.
this much. And I did have someone asked because it was a while ago, they did ask, just to kind of close the loop on this part of it. They asked but why would an expansion team go for more than the Timberwolves or more than the Suns?
Mhm.
We have to remember you're kind of paying two pieces, right? You're paying to own the team, then you have to pay just to be invited to the club, right? So
Yep.
anybody can start a pro basketball team. It's then you have to pay to be invited into the NBA. So that's where, let's say the going rate for a team in those cities is 4 billion. Well, the NBA is going to get an extra probably billion a piece on top, because that's your like entrance fee into
Yep.
being part of the club that is NBA teams. So that's why they're going for more than maybe what you would think a franchise valuation should be.
Right. Not cheap, but with the new wave of NBA ownership, there's some very wealthy people that are owning
Yeah.
teams these days. So
Yep.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. So expansion coming, certainly something that we'll talk more about as we hear more about it. And someday, Keith, we're going to be talking about the expansion draft and who gets protected and who doesn't, and all
Yep.
the different strategy involved in it. And someday that'll be a lot of. What was funny was we mentioned that on, I want to say it was our live show. And I think I said something like, God willing, if we're still doing the show then or something. And there was a response in the comment section. Somebody said,
Why would
wait,
you guys
is
not?
the show, why would you not? Is
Yeah.
the show going away or anything? Like, and
Yeah.
no,
I
I'm
saw that.
not saying that at all. I just mean like it's like that old quote. I forget the coach that said it when we said, well, is this where is this guy? Is he day to day? And he said something like, well, aren't we all? Like
Yeah.
that's more what I mean. Like, who knows where everything's going to be in 3 years or whenever expansion actually comes in. But no, we're not going anywhere.
Yeah, no, there are no plans to stop doing the show. It was funny too because I think then we were like, it was a Friday, and then like we didn't have a show, and it's like,
Right.
hey, what's going on? It's like because it's the weekend and it's the summer, and all that. So yeah, pretty good there. Yeah, hey, thanks for caring, fellas. Like we,
Yes.
and ladies,
It.
I guess it shouldn't just limit us to the male watchers. We probably have at least 6 or 7 females who watch the show.
Maybe.
So we'll take it, but yeah, it's we appreciate all the support from y'all. Hey, I want to throw something in. I just looked. We are 298 reviews on Apple. Two heroes step up and get us to 300. Let's go. And shout out to the more recent subscribers. Not a massive surge, but we pushed over 34K in the last week. So let's go. Our videos have been performing really well. Best way you guys can help us out is like the show, share the show with people, write those ratings and reviews, just engage in the comments. Even if it's, you don't have to be the one who's like, because there's this battle, this on every YouTube video to be first, and sometimes it makes me laugh when it's like first, second, third,
in
fourth,
the comment section.
in the comment section. But the comment section, if there's comments, there's engagement that way, that helps us as well. But just help by subscribing and liking the videos and supporting the show that way. That's huge for us.
Absolutely. All helpful. All right, let's get into our one big question. And today we're going to be taking a look at the Central Division. We've done the 3 Western Conference divisions, so now we are heading east. We're going to take a look at the Central Division, and I guess just like we've done for all of the divisions here, just a refresher for everybody, we're each providing one big question that we think needs to be answered this season for each team. Looking at the Central Division, Milwaukee, Cleveland, Indiana, Chicago, and Detroit. Keith, does this match up with what you expect the final order will be this season?
Maybe. I think the top 3 will be the top 3. I think 4th will be 4th and 5th will be 5th. I think there's a world where if Milwaukee takes their foot off the gas a little bit, says, hey, we've seen what it looks like when we get to the playoffs and Giannis and Dame aren't ready and can't go. We don't need to win the division, win 50 games, push for that, and try to be a home court advantage team. We just need to get there healthy. I could see them sliding behind either Cleveland or Indiana. And Cleveland and Indiana, they're pretty much neck and neck, much like they were a year ago. So yeah, it's so funny with the Eastern Conference. I think almost everyone is going to come in with the same 8 teams as the top 8. And I think it's going to be then who are your top 4, who are 5 and 6, and then who are your 7 and 8 in teams in the play-in tournament, and then the 9-10 play-in. That's kind of a little bit of a toss-up. I think there's a bunch of teams in contention there, but yeah. So I think this is going to be a real test for. I feel pretty good that we're going to make the playoffs. Do we feel like we need to put everything into the regular season to get there, or is just once we get there, we'll kind of make our run from there? That's going to me, determine this more than anything. If I trusted the Bucks would A, stay healthy, and B, push all the way through, I think they're the best team of that group of 3. But I don't know that's going to be how it goes for them.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think you're right. If we said everybody's healthy and everybody tries over the course of the season, I think this is the final order, just like this. But of course, it's close enough to where injuries, taking your foot off the gas, that could shift this thing around. But I guess let's kick this thing off with Milwaukee, and I'll let you go first. What's your one big question for the Bucks?
Yeah, I touched on it. Health. Can you be healthy? And I know we can say that for every team in the league. And that would be an easy cop out. We'd be done with this video in 10 seconds. But the reality is with the Bucks, there are players who have legitimate real health concerns. Giannis has missed considerable time each of the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Damian Lillard has missed time now a few years running. Chris Middleton has missed time a few years running. Couple years ago, Brook Lopez missed a chunk of time with a back injury. If you could tell me those guys are going to be regular healthy, they're going to play 60 games each, right? And they'll miss some games, but it's not going to be, massive amounts, like it be half the season or more or anything like that. Then I think they'll be fine. They'll probably be somewhere between 45 and 55 wins and be a pretty good team. And, they'll be in the mix for home court advantage in the East. Are we hitting a point where these injuries that have started to pop up later in the season, are those going to be things where that's just how life is now, and it almost we're going to have to really sacrifice large chunks of the regular season just to try to get to the playoffs healthy? And is that even enough of a guarantee that you'll get there? I just don't know with Milwaukee. We have too much injury history now for me to fully bet against it.
And especially when you've got, Giannis playing the style that he plays, Brook Lopez at 36. Like, there's plenty of guys that you can worry about on the injury front. So I think that's a good call. What I'm looking at with Milwaukee, it's can the guards defend? And I think that was an issue they ran into last year. You had Malik Beasley trying to be a 3-and-D style guard next to Damian Lillard. That didn't work out so well. We know Pat Connaughton can do some things there. But I think for me, it really comes down to Gary Trent Jr. and DeLon Wright. Are they enough on the defensive side of the ball next to Dame to where it offsets that? Talk about a complete shift going from Drew Holiday, one of the best defensive guards in the league, to Damian Lillard, who, let's face it, is not a good defensive player at all. I don't think anybody would argue he's a good defensive player. That's a big shift, and you have to have the right complement to him in there. And I think last season they didn't quite have that. And then Dame also was not quite as efficient offensively, and that kind of compounded things. But can these guys that they picked up on minimum contracts, and I thought they were good deals. You look at the minimums they got: DeLon Wright, Taurean Prince, Gary Trent Jr. I think these are really good deals for the Bucks. But can they give you what you need on the defensive side of the ball? And the guy I'm really watching, it's Gary Trent Jr. There was a point years ago when he was a pretty solid defender, but that was when he was with the Blazers. It's been a while since we've seen that Gary Trent Jr., with the counter argument being somehow Gary Trent Jr. is still only 26 years old. I don't know how. It feels like he should be at least 30 by now because he's been in the NBA for 10 years minimum.
At least, yeah, it feels like.
Right? But somehow Gary Trent Jr. is still just 26 years old, so still very much in his prime. Can he tap in to the defensive chops that we saw way back in the day with Portland? I think that's going to be a critical thing there. So all those minimum guys, the guards that are going to play alongside Dame, can you make up for his defensive deficiencies so you can let Dame do what Dame does on the offensive end? That, I think, will be a big, big factor in the final outcome of the Bucks season.
Yeah, for a team that was dealing with second apron issues, didn't have a lot of ways to improve, I thought the Bucks had an outstanding summer. I think Gary Trent Jr., when all is said and done, that's going to go down as one of the best minimum signings of all time. I think he's going to be outstanding for them. That said, I do think he's a tad overrated defensively. People act like this is an all defense guy who's just been overlooked the last couple of years. He's not at that level, but he's a huge upgrade over what they had previous. You get Chris Middleton healthy, still a fairly solid defender. You at least now you could maybe kind of slide Damian Lillard off onto a wing and let Middleton and Trent take take on the guards. You get right in there when you need him to. They did not have a viable backup for Damian Lillard for a lot of last season. It was campaign. Then they eventually swapped him out for Patrick Beverly. Beverly, though, not really an on-ball guy. His defense has slipped mightily over the years. He's getting by more on reputation and veteran know-how, at this point. But DeLon Wright, pretty good defender, still fairly solid backup level guy. And then I think Taurean Prince was a sneaky important pickup for this
Big time.
team because, again, I think both Giannis and Middleton are going to miss some time, and getting him to come in no one's going to come back and be like, man, Taurean Prince, making the all-star case or anything. But I think you're going to go into most games knowing Taurean Prince is going to hit his open shots. He's going to get me about 10, 12 points a game. He's going to rebound. He's going to play a little defense, and I'm fine. And on the nights when he's a 15-minute a night backup, the production will go down a little bit, but he'll still be just as good of a player impact-wise. You're just not going to see the numbers, but when you need him to step up, he's a pretty scalable guy. So I think that was a really good pickup. I'm with you, man. I want to see, what does it look like? Because they have to either be a top 5 offense and a middle of the road defense, or they need to defend better and then have a pretty good offense to get there. And I tend to lean more towards the latter being a little more likely. I don't know how great this offense is going to be. There's potential that it could be awesome, but we saw last year it was just a little messy at times because you had 3 guys in Dame, Middleton, and Giannis, all guys who are used to being involved at the end of games in tight games. And when you have 3, only 2 because you can really only run 2-man action. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all comes together with them with a full season, hopefully a healthy full season.
Yeah, hopefully healthy. That's going to be critical for them. All right, let's jump over to the Cavs. I'll kick things off with them. And for Cleveland, this is a talented roster. You look at their starting 5. You've got a lot of, some solid names here. Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, of course, Jared Allen. You've got guys like Max Strus you can slot in there. And he was a rare Miami Heat player who leaves Miami and is still successful. But Evan Mobley, from me, is the biggest question. Look, this team, it's got a lot of big names. Donovan Mitchell's going to do Donovan Mitchell things. I think Darius Garland can probably have a better season than he had last season. But the true upside for this team to get to that next level, it rests on those slender shoulders of Evan Mobley. If he can really take that next step, that's what's going to truly propel this team. And I think we've seen some flashes with Mobley at the 5 that's actually worked out pretty well for this squad. And so I'm curious to see if that's something that they explore even further this coming season, even in conjunction with Jared Allen, where Allen comes out and you can go smaller with Mobley at the 5 and off you go. But I do think a lot of the success of the Cavs, if they're able to take that next step and get themselves to the next level, it's going to depend on Evan Mobley making the leap and becoming all-star, quasi-superstar tier player, which is what we projected for him when he came into the league, and we were all so enticed. He hasn't quite taken that leap just yet. If he can do it this season, then the Cavs can take a big step forward.
That's a great call with Mobley. If Evan Mobley by the end of the year, if we're talking about him as the Cavs, either best player or pushing Donovan Mitchell to be the Cavs' best player, the Cavs are going to have had an awesome season. If we're talking about, man, Evan Mobley, I really like him. He's pretty good, but, there's still a lot of room to go. And they're probably going to be pretty similar to what they were this year. Not bad by any means. Just maybe you win around, maybe you don't. You're kind of a second round team. That's your upside. So my big question for them is, can Kenny Atkinson make double big, double small guard work? Because if he can't, there has to be roster changes because they have too much money now locked into guys to kind of sit here and wait this out for another year and another year. You have to see Allen and Mobley can work and we can make this happen. You have to see we could get here with this. That's going to be the things that we're going to be keeping an eye on. My guess, it's just a guess, I think he's going to make Mitchell and Garland work just fine. I think we're going to hit by the trade deadline or at the latest next summer, they're going to move Jared Allen in a trade. It was not a coincidence that Jared Allen's extension unlike Lauri Markkanen's, got done with 1 day to spare that he could be traded at the trade deadline. It was not a coincidence that that was the timing on the Allen extension. So just something to keep an eye on. I think he's now maybe even more tradable signed to that
Hmm.
extension because I think teams are going to look at it and say, all right, I get him for the rest of his 20s into his early 30s at a pretty fair number, even on the extension, right around 30
Yeah.
million a season. Let's go. He's a good player. We can move on. So that's going to be what I'm keeping my eye on there is I kind of hope the answer is the first one, right? And Atkinson can make it work because I like that the Cavs have kind of done this in quote unquote the right way, right? They LeBron left, they kind of tore it down, they rebuilt around a couple young guys, they made a couple smart trades, they hit on some draft picks, and they just kind of kept stacking and adding to it. So I'm hopeful they can make it work, but this is just a very, very expensive team.
I mean, team we just talked about the other day, Brandon Ingram, Jared Allen, maybe something there. I mean, I know the Pels are looking for a big. We'll see. I don't know if the Cavs would do it or not, but all right, we'll see. We'll see. All right, let's jump over to uh, the Indiana Pacers,
Indiana.
and you're up
Yep.
first on this one, Keith.
Yeah. And my question on this one is how are they going to play everybody? Like, assuming they go into next season healthy, I think their starting lineup is Tyrese Halliburton, Andrew
Yep.
Nemhard, Aaron Nesmith, Pascal Siakam, Miles Turner. Pretty good starting group. Then coming off the bench, you've got Matherin, Toppin, McConnell, Ben Shepard, Isaiah Jackson. That's probably your bench guys. My question then becomes is Toppin, who you invest a lot of money in, you gonna be able to get him more than 10 minutes a night? Siakam's a guy that has historically played in the mid to high 30s in minutes per game. Can you get enough minutes for McConnell, who you extended? Now, McConnell's a guy I think you could play him 9 minutes a night and still be okay. But what is
Yeah.
that going to look like? And I haven't even mentioned Jarris Walker yet. I like Jarris Walker quite a bit. I don't see how he gets on the floor for this team. Benedict Matherin, I've got him projected in my at least opening night depth chart to be back on the bench, coming off the bench. Great spot for him. But again, he's in his extension year. He's going to play this year out. He'll be extension eligible. He's kind of playing for his next contract. He did the whole rumors were we got to clear out room so he can start and can play more. And then he got hurt, and Andrew Nemhard really emerged. So I'm just a little bit nervous about the way Rick Carlisle is going to have to push to try to get all these guys enough minutes. Maybe in the end, it doesn't matter. And it's just going to be, hey, you want to play more? Beat the guy out in front of you. Play better than him. That's how you're going to get more minutes, and that brings competition. But history tells me that often goes sideways in the NBA. Yeah. It doesn't always go that way. And that's where this could get a little bit messy for Indiana.
That's a great point. That can just lead to friction as much as we want to say, well, compete and the competition is going to propel us further. Well, there's a point though, where you're going to have somebody that's sitting on the bench, not playing the minutes that they want, not in the role that they want, and they're stressing out over their next contract and not getting enough money on that deal or not getting what they want. And that can create issues within a team. So seeing how that plays out, that dynamic will be important, I think, for the Pacers. For me, it's a little bit of Lakers bias coming in here because we've talked about him so much. What happens with Miles Turner? He's on an expiring contract. So much of this team's defense is built around him. I don't think he wants to leave Indiana. I don't think Indiana wants to lose Miles Turner. But nonetheless, he's on an expiring contract. There's a ton of teams looking for centers right now. And I think he would be at or near the top of a lot of teams' lists. And at just $20 million, it wouldn't be that difficult to stack up salaries and go get him. So what does that dynamic look like between the Pacers and Turner? Is it all kumbaya and Miles Turner says, I'm never leaving Pawnee again and I'm staying here. I will not go to Eagleton? Or do the Pacers feel the same way? Or come the trade deadline, are we talking about, man, we don't know if Miles Turner is going to stay. Maybe the Pacers need to start looking at some trade options so they don't lose him for nothing. That's my big question. Where does this all lead with Miles Turner and the Pacers in terms of their future? Do they want to continue on this path together, which I would suspect is what they want to do? But if not, Could we be talking Miles Turner trades at the trade deadline?
Few thoughts on that. One, it was nice that we had that year where Miles Turner wasn't constantly like in every single trade
Right.
proposal out there. It was just kind of nice to have that 1 year off. But I totally agree with you why we're back there again. Second thing, Miles Turner also not extendable because of the way he did his renegotiation and extension. He cannot be extended. So he will be a free agent next summer. That doesn't mean he's leaving Indiana.
No.
Indiana will still also have that exclusive window from the finals end to the start of the offseason where they can negotiate a deal with him. But he's not extendable. That always adds a little bit of a layer of uncertainty to it. Last thing, the Pacers, if I take out like free agents and a couple guys who are on non-guaranteed contracts, but with all the guys because of Halliburton and Siakam and Nemhard and all those guys who have new deals, the Pacers had $165 million next season, already in fully guaranteed money for 10 players. Let's say Miles Turner, let's say he gives them a discount and says, I'll take 25 million. That would push them over the luxury tax. That would take them up and over the luxury tax line. They're about 22 million clear of the luxury tax right now. This is not a team that has historically paid the luxury tax. So I bet you a year from now, we're talking about Miles Turner still with the Pacers. Somebody else in that 10 to $20 million contract range will not be. One of those players will have been moved in a trade because they just can't see this team saying, yeah, let's go, full in and pay the tax and all this other stuff. And that might not be the worst thing for this team
Sure.
if they can move off, rebalance a little bit, still be a very good team. I just can't see Miles Turner getting away.
Great point. Great point. All right, let's jump over to the Chicago Bulls. I'm up here. Keith, for me, it's very, very simple. What's happening with Zach LaVine? When are they going to move on from LaVine? Because look, almost in a quasi Netsian way, the Chicago Bulls, it feels like they are finally picking a direction, or they're trying to anyway, but they're not all there yet. They haven't made their Mikal Bridges trade just yet. They still need to move on from Vucevic and Zach LaVine. LaVine being the bigger contract, being the bigger concern. Does Zach LaVine accidentally go out there and win you too many games? Are there teams that are willing to take him or not? He's obviously been a big talking point for the Bulls, but it's very clear. It's time. The Bulls need to go another direction. Zach LaVine needs to go another direction. The question is when? When will they find a team that is ready, willing, and able to take Zach LaVine? And it may take him playing and showing everybody that he's healthy and he's back to being himself. But that's the big question hovering over the Bulls, because I do think they want to fully commit to building around these young players. But to do it, you've got to move on from some of these veterans. And Zach LaVine is the biggest piece that's still hanging out there that we know a move's coming. The question is when, and does it happen this season?
Yeah, great point. I'm just going to extend on yours. What's happening with Nick Vucevic? What's going to happen?
Yeah.
What's going to happen with Lonzo Ball? What are we doing with all the ball handlers? Are they going to extend Josh Giddey? Are they going to offer him an extension? What is this team going to look like in 6 months, in a year? Well, what are the Bulls going to be? Because there's just an awful lot of dudes here, and I don't know what they're doing with a bunch of them. I'm like the shrug emoji guy. I'm like I just don't know.
Who knows?
Right? Like I just don't know what to make of this team. All I do know right now is way too many guys who need the ball on this roster, and that's not going to be good. Poor Patrick Williams. I've talked so much is, can Patrick Williams scale? Yeah, Patrick Williams might just be hanging out in the corner dying for 2 shots a game, because all the ball handlers are guys who like to have the ball and like to shoot. Not that there's not good passers in that group, but they're just, a bunch of guys who are going to be looking for their own. Vooch is a good passer for a big, but again, somebody who's more of a scorer. So I just don't know where it goes. And for everybody who keeps saying well, it'll all sort itself out. Yeah, it eventually will. But I mean, look at this grouping of just ball handlers, primary
just point
ball
guards.
handlers. Yeah. Even if you've got Kobe White, you've got Ayo Dosunmu, You got Javon Carter. Those were the 3 point guards last year. Then you add in Josh Giddey. Maybe he's a wing. Maybe he's an on ball. I think he's an on ball wing. That's primarily his best role. You
Hmm.
got like Zach LaVine, major guy who has the ball in his hands a lot and is a score first guy. You have Lonzo Ball coming back. People seem to think they're just going to say, no, he's just an expiring contract. Let him sit. Not after all he's gone through. They're going to give him a chance to play. They're, if for no other reason, to show, geez, Lonzo kind of looks okay. Maybe we can trade him
Yeah.
in that situation. So that's a lot of guys who need the ball. A lot of guys who do a lot of stuff with the ball in their hands. Just going to get kind of messy. So I think we just need to be super cautious of all of this. I think it's going to be a little. I just think this group is going to look a little messy to start, and in the end, maybe that's okay. I don't know how much this team even really wants to win right now. That's probably not the end of the world.
All right, let's jump over to finish things off. The Detroit Pistons, Detroit basketball. Keith, you're up first on this one.
Yeah, it's really. Can we just get to be a normal bad team, like a 25 win bad team, instead of this horrendous team that lost a million games in a row and their fans were like, I hate everybody on this team. Why do we keep playing all these guys? They did kind of get there by the second half of the season when a lot of the veteran guys are out of the mix. But then, like, I get the idea behind, hey, we want to sign some vets that can come in and play. The Tobias Harris contract still confuses me. I'm not exactly sure who they were bidding against. I don't know who else was offering that kind of money. But
That's the Detroit tax right there.
yeah, right. That's a big part of it. But then don't pay it. Then just move to whoever's next on the list. But that's a little bit for me. That's water under the bridge. I think what the Pistons have done is they put together a team that makes a lot more sense, not to be good, not to be even be a play-in tournament team or anything like that. Maybe they'll completely prove me wrong, but just to be a normal bad team, but a team where you can start to get a read on some of the kids. You can really understand, all right, hey, Cade now is not taking these pull-up, fall-away 18-footers because the last 5 trips when he drove and kicked, it just was a clank jump shot or a turnover. Now he's making the right reads because Tobias Harris is hitting shots. Tim Hardaway Jr. is hitting shots. Malik Beasley, Simone Fontecchio for a full year. These guys are making shots. So there's a lot of talent on this Pistons team. A whole lot of guys, when I look at them, like, I kind of like that guy. I kind of like that guy. So I'm curious to watch it now grow in a way that just makes more sense and is hopefully far more functional than what we've seen out of this team the last couple seasons.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I mean, can you just be a bad team? Like that's it's a low bar, right? Just be a bad team. But nonetheless, such is the state of the Pistons. When I look at this team, there's a ton of question marks, a ton of different things we can talk about. But the guy that I want to highlight, it's Jalen Duren. 12 boards per game last season, 14 points. Can he continue his ascent as a 21-year-old? Can he become like a foundation piece for this team moving forward? He's going to be turning 21 in November. So this is a talented young player, but can he become the kind of big presence they need in the middle, night in, night out, and take that next step? And again, I could say that about a lot of guys. Cade Cunningham, does he take the next step? Oscar Thompson, Ron Holland, what can he be? The rookie that is drafted, tons of young guys. Jaden Ivey as well. He had a month last season when he went nuts, and he was fantastic. But seeing Jalen Duren put up the numbers that he already is makes me wonder what his ceiling is given his age. Can he really become a force for this Pistons team as they start to figure out all the rest of it? Can he become that guy in the middle that everything's going to not necessarily orbit around, because that's going to be Cade Cunningham, but can he become that kind of backbone for the team?
I love it because that's going to help in a more functional environment. That's going to help us answer some questions on Duren. Are you a guy we're building around, or are you just another guy? So if you're just another guy, we need to go get a big, right? That's the reality, because we're in an ideal world, we're a couple years out from this team really starting to push forward and start to push for postseason spots and in the like. So then it becomes, all right, if you're the guy, awesome, great. Now we have that locked in. Or do we need to go get the guy to be there in the middle? Because I believe in Cade Cunningham. I think Cade Cunningham has shown in last year, mostly healthy all season, showed what he can really be. And that to me is exciting. Thompson's going to get himself on the floor just because he does a million things. And it's a
Yeah.
million things that are all conducive to winning. Like he's kind of everywhere. He's one of my favorite defensive players to watch in the league already. There's just a million different things he can do. And sometimes he's doing them at 1,000 miles an hour and he's trying to do all the things and it just looks like a catastrophe. And then there's other times where it just clicks and everything will slow down for him. Going to find out, is Jaden Ivey a starting guard? Is Jaden Ivey a nice combo guard off your bench? These are the questions we're going to start to get answered for ourselves this season. But in order to do that, we can't be losing games regularly by 25, 30 points in the end of November, in December. We need to be at least in games and competitive until we get into the new year. And then if it's like, hey, now we're going to Tobias Harris minutes get cut from 30 a night to 20, and Tim Hardaway Jr. is not in the rotation, and we're playing the kid. That's fine because now you've had a half season plus of we at least played kind of what Utah's done the last couple of years of we're going to be pretty competitive for a while and we're going to bow out. It's like a step below that, but just be competitive, be a normal bad team, and that's a step forward for the Pistons.
All right. We'll see if the Pistons can indeed take that step forward this coming season and become a normal bad team. Oh, Detroit. Long way to go. All right. But everybody, thank you so much for joining. We will take a look at another team, another conference, or another division. Man, 2 strikes on that one. Another division. All the things. We're going to take a look at that tomorrow for our one big question. Thank you again for joining the show. Make sure you do subscribe over on the YouTube channel. Till next time, see ya and stay safe.